Hi, I'm Deborah, business owner and mom to Gen Z kids on a mission to make sure they get hired and become financially independent as soon as possible. If you're a parent wanting to get your kids hired or a new job seeker desperately trying to get hired, this show is for you, and I am so glad you're here. Hello and welcome to my first show. Hopefully I have more listeners than just my mom. Hi, Mom. So I wanted to start a podcast because I think that there is an emerging issue. Well, it's really not emerging. It's been ongoing, but I feel like it's being grossly overlooked. And that is how unprepared Gen Z is for the workforce. Now, keep in mind, I'm the mom of two kids that are currently in college. So I'm doing all the things to technically prepare them for the workforce. But what I've learned and what I've seen so far is that higher education is not really preparing them for that. Now that's even assuming that they end up working in their scope or in their major, which oftentimes so many don't even do that. But more than anything, my biggest concern is when they graduate, can they create a resume that gets them an interview? And the answer that I've seemingly come up with across the board with the students I've already helped is no, they can't. Now, I hate to speak in absolutisms because there are always exceptions. So if you are a parent that has an exceptionally driven kid, that's fantastic, and I'm sure they're going to do great. Or perhaps you have a kid in a STEM program, or you have a kid going to grad school. Those are all different nuances that may not be applicable in this particular case. But what I'm speaking of today is your kid is graduating from University of wherever, and they basically are graduating going, yeah, I still don't really know what I want to do. I have a business degree, I have a communications degree, I have a history degree, whatever the broad spectrum degree is. Or maybe they've just graduated high school and they said, you know what, college isn't for me and I need to go get a job doing something. And that's kind of open-ended, like, shoot, I don't really know what I want. I don't really know what's out there. Those kids typically flounder when it comes to creating a resume. So the whole goal of my show, and I'd like it to be weekly, is to discuss actionable tips that we could be using to help Gen Z get hired and get launched, and also to discuss current events because I find them to be fascinating when it comes to trends in the industry, what recruiters are seeing, what different hiring managers are seeing, and just different tips and tricks that we can be offering our kids to make sure that they get hired as soon as possible. So one of the things I wanted to discuss was a current event that came up recently, and I've seen this now published in multiple articles and multiple TV stations have picked it up, and it's the topic of bringing your parent to your interview. Now, if that sounds wild to you, good, because it should. That's crazy town, in my opinion. I don't understand a world that is normal in. I truly don't get it. When you go to apply for a job, it is not your time to bring your parent. This is your time to shine and be independent and show that employer that you are the perfect applicant. As a business owner, if I ever walked out into a lobby to interview somebody who had their mom or dad there with them, that would be an immediate no for me. I would probably still conduct the interview just out of pure professionalism, and then I would throw the resume in the trash as soon as they walked out the door. That tells an employer everything they need to know about why they should not hire you. Parents, I don't understand any of this, and yet it's seemingly becoming more and more normal. The statistic is 1/4 of all Gen Z applicants are bringing their parents to their interview. That is so crazy town. I don't have a file in my brain for it. I do not. I think it's wild and nuts. And I was talking to my parents about this the other day, and my dad was like, wait a minute, the mom or the dad is going into the interview? No. They're not going into the interview because, of course, no job would tolerate that. But they're sitting in the waiting room waiting for them. And that's just absolutely crossing a line and being counterintuitive to getting your kid launched. Now, I would go so far as to say, if your kid is nervous or unsure and they're like, hey, can you drive me and just wait in the car until I get out? Of course, by all means. I feel like all in the scope of normal. But if you think that it's at all beneficial for you to go in that elevator and walk up and sit in that lobby with your kid, I'm here to tell you, you're making a huge mistake. Don't do it. You are interfering with their future and yours when it comes to getting them financially independent, because they're never going to get hired if you're sitting in that lobby. And also, the other thing is I just saw another follow-up article to this, because this has really sparked controversy across the board when it comes to Gen Z and how they function when it comes to the job market. But one article recently in the LA Times was saying, was condoning it and saying, well, of course, these kids need that after they've, experienced all they've been through being locked down and during COVID, that the parent was the only person they had to talk to. Yeah, sorry, but that is just not going to fly as a reason anymore. No employer is going to look at that and go, oh, yeah, well, these kids have been through a lot with COVID. It's just not going to happen. And it's a terrible, terrible, terrible path. So I know I sound super judgmental. Apologies in advance, but I just think that that's nuts. So anyway, okay, this is another one that's potentially controversial as well, and often shocking to hear to most people. So I don't know if anybody realizes that you will never get the job if they do not like you. I know that sounds simple, but I need you to stop and really think about that, because oftentimes people get so wrapped up into, well, I'm so qualified for this position. And while that may be true, if you're not likable, nobody cares about your qualifications. You could be the most qualified candidate in the room, in the building. And if they don't like you, they're never going to want you on their team. End of story. There's no other way to explain it. Bringing the parents to the interview, I really feel like goes against likability, unless for some reason you happen to be interviewing with somebody that's potentially young and from your generation. But even then, I don't know how that could be seen as a positive with any spin, because even that, in theory, Gen Zer that's interviewing you already has the job, and they don't bring their parents to work to do their job. So likely they're not going to think you bringing your parents to the interview is a likability factor. So just know that you are more likely than not going to be interviewing with somebody that's a Gen Xer or a Boomer. They're all still out there. And those generations are never going to tolerate your parent coming, and they are never going to like you for it. That's going to be a big ding. So don't do it. I would really appreciate it if you, like I said, again, would follow my show. I will try to link that article in the show notes if I can. The show notes is the description below the podcast, so that you can see what I'm referring to. And I will be discussing more current events on other shows, as well as actionable tips that we could be using to help our kids, and anything under the sun we could be doing to get them ready to launch and be financially independent with a real job. So I look forward to talking to you again. Have a great week.